Kemi Badenoch says that 10% of the civil service should be jailed. Up to 10% of civil servants should be in prison for leaking official secrets and undermining ministers, Kemi Badenoch has said. The leadership candidate said not all civil servants were an issue, and many were like everyone else, with about 10% being absolutely magnificent. But she said there's about 5 to 10% of them who are very, very bad, should be in prison bad, leaking official secrets, undermining their ministers, agitating. I had some of it in my department. She said there was a problem with ministers using their powers too often. She said the trick to being a good minister is to find the good ones quickly, bring them close and try and get the bad ones out of your department as quickly as possible. A source close to Badenoch said she was joking when she made the comments, but it is the latest eyebrow-raising intervention she's made during the Conservative Party conference. Now, it's not clear what specific secrets she's referring to. Now, if it's state secrets, yes, that could undermine security, then obviously that's a big deal. However, she could also be referring to leaking information about corruption. Surely it's the duty of those in government and civil servants to make sure journalists have information on ministers if they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. Now, the next thing she says is very telling. I had some of it in my department, usually union-led, but most of them actually want to do a good job, and the good ones are very frustrated by the bad ones. Now, to me, that just sounds like she wants basically complete loyal civil servants, and those who are disloyal should be in prison. Now, she didn't directly say that, but when you piece it all together, there's an insinuation there. Kevin, you're more than welcome to correct me if you think I'm being over the top, but I can see parallels between this and Trump, the GOP Project 2025, where part of the plan is to rid bureaucrats, which is euphemism for dissenters, and they want to fill the government, legal departments, pretty much the entire state apparatus with loyalists. Do you agree with that? Maybe not on such a big scale, but it's the same idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the same idea. I think it's a very Project 2025 concept. It's essentially fascism. It's fascism trying to cloak itself as regard for the law, which is, of course, what fascism always tries to do. It essentially hides within the cloak of freedom of speech and democracy and the rule of law in order to destroy and undermine all of those things. What she's essentially talking about, especially when she says things like union-led, she wants to purge leftists, any kind of remotely leftist person from authority. And we've seen that as well from other people at the Tory party conference who talked about purging universities of but essentially enemies of the Conservative Party. And of course, this goes beyond just the potential sort of government overreach of trying to protect legitimate national state secrets, as you mentioned, and goes into the fact that it's obviously trying to curtail and put a freeze on any kind of whistleblowing about corruption, which of course was rampant in the Conservative Party. And that's what this is. It's score settling. It's petty, bureaucratic, fascistic score settling with leftists, an attempt to purge people of a different political persuasion, which is essentially the first thing that fascists always try and do. They'll either go after the arts, or in this case, I suppose, academia, or they'll go after the civil service, positions of power.
Yeah, and in one of her recent interviews, she said how careful she is with her words, and she never says anything she regrets. But following that, she came out with the most crazy things. She said that maternity pay was too high, and that women and families should rely more on their personal responsibility rather than having, rights for workers. She said that working in McDonald's suddenly made her working class. And now we have people around Badenoch saying, oh, don't worry, she was joking about the civil service comments. Badenoch, far from being careful, she seems like a complete liability. But she is second favourite becoming Tory leader?
Yeah, she's currently second favourite, and realistically, I think the bookmakers have Jenrick as first and her as a close second, and those are the two. Albeit that Cleverly seems to have done well with his speech, but there were 5 weeks to go. Who knows? But yeah, she's a loose cannon. The idea that she chooses her words carefully, God only knows what she'd do if she let her lips fly a little bit. It's ridiculous, right? She, in addition to all of the gaffes you just mentioned, she also said that the minimum wage was too high and was hurting businesses. So look, literally just coming out with the worst ideas that no one agrees with. She wants to turbocharge neoliberalism, which is exactly the problem that got Liz Truss into so much danger. And of course, Liz Truss reared her ugly head again at the conference, going on about how she would have done so much better than Rishi Sunak at the general election. Except, of course, she was kicked out before she even got to that point. So clearly not. Clearly and obviously not.
I mean, this feels like a reversal of the Labour leadership competition, because you had Keir Starmer pretending to be a lefty to get elected as leader, then pivots to the centre right. These guys, all right, you know, they believe this sort of stuff when they say the minimum wage is too high because they're pro-business, right?
Yeah.
They don't like these sorts of things. So it's the opposite of Starmer, but in the way it's probably similar, because, I mean, look, even though we know they believe these things, you would think, why are they talking about it openly? They don't exactly sound like popular things to say, especially on maternity pay, an insane thing to say. Do you think they're just courting the membership? And if they were to become leader, pivot to the so-called centre? When I say pivot, though, not like Keir Starmer actually pivoting in his policy, but pretending to pivot to be more moderate. Do you think that's in play? Or actually, are they like, do you know what? We're not doing this sort of playing by the same rules anymore. We're trying to get reform voters. We're going to be radical, and we're going to keep it even in up to a general election.
Well, they're not even courting Conservative voters yet, because, of course, there's another round of eliminations via MPs until they get down to the final two. So essentially, it looks like it's going to be Robert Jenrick and probably Kemi Badenoch, which are literally the two worst options from the Conservatives' own like long-term standing. It's the worst they could possibly do. I desperately hope that they elect Kemi Badenoch, because she's a lunatic who will destroy the Conservative Party, which I think in the long run is a lot better for the country. She is, of course, an horrific transphobe and culture warrior of all kinds. She does genuinely believe the appalling idea she's putting forward. And of course, she, in her speech today, she said that she wanted a root and branch reform of every single aspect of what the British state does, which is essentially code for I want to privatise the NHS. That's what we all know that to be. So she's a true believer in that sense. But she won't have any chance to enact those policies because she'll have destroyed the Conservative Party. In trying to chase the reform vote, they essentially disregard 75% of the country and make themselves completely unelectable. Yeah. So if they want to destroy themselves, elect Jenrick or Badenoch, and it looks like they're going to.
The problem I have with this argument is that many people say, I want the Tories to elect the most radical leader. They will lose. And yes, in terms of electability, I completely agree. Badenoch, well, anyone in the leadership race isn't going to win an election. Yeah. I mean, I think that's largely out of their hands. What worries me, though, is legitimizing these sorts of arguments. For me, the way I see the map of politics right now is Labour's going to win the next election with or without Keir Starmer, possibly. I mean, let's throw that in there. But the debate is what worries me. Now, for me, I would want to see a more quote-unquote moderate Tory leader, because at least in terms of the debate, they won't be talking about, I don't know, Badenoch didn't say scrapping maternity pay, but she alluded to there was an issue with it, and the minimum wage. And I feel like, given that Labour are very happy to parrot right-wing myths and lies, they're more likely to fall into that trap. So what worries me is Kemi Badenoch becoming leader, and she just pulls Labour to the right. Whereas if there was a more centrist Tory leader, even though they're not going to win, it might give more space for Labour not to go down the right-wing pipeline, because they already have anyway. Well, that's my argument.
Firstly, they already have, and I don't see that changing fundamentally anytime soon. And secondly, there is no non-extreme example. What I'm talking about is not choosing the most extreme, but choosing the most obviously crazy, the one that the public can see through. James Cleverly is quite a good salesman of the same crazy bullshit. Tom Tugendhat is a less effective, but still seemingly nice guy who can sell those arguments. They all believe fundamentally in the same precepts, right? They all want to get rid of remove us from the ECHR. They all believe that immigration needs to be vastly curtailed and that we need to set up Rwanda plus. They all fundamentally believe in one-upping themselves on who can deep throat Israel the most, which has been a fantastic, just cavalcade of madness, including the story I think we'll talk about later with Bobby J. So they all fundamentally believe the same nonsense, be it social, economic, or foreign policy. It's just that some of them are able to sell it in a more sane fashion and might be more electable, whereas Kemi Badenoch and Bobby Jenrick aren't either of those things.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.